everybody. Welcome to our energy update here for the 2nd of July until the 7th of July. My name is Jona Bryndis, and I wish you a happy holiday weekend. In Canada and the USA, it's national holiday time, so probably a lot of partying. Before we start looking at the energies that are coming up next week, as you all know, those of you who are frequent viewers of this energy update or who watch the recordings regularly, I find it very important to look back into the past week or weeks sometimes and to reflect on it. We can't really separate the things that are coming up now from what was going on last week and the division line here of the days. It's only because I do the energy reports on Saturdays. So starting next week, actually, I'm going to change this. I'm going to do the life energy updates for energetically sensitives and empaths on Thursday during the day of our mountain time here in the USA. So if you live in Europe, then you'll be happy to hear that from now on you'll be able to watch live. The purpose of these live energy updates is for you to ask questions and to get involved, all right? So I'm not doing like energy readings or anything like that, but what I do is I can help you with contextualizing some of the things that you are going through or that you have been going through. And so I really, really love the interaction with you guys. And if you see my eyes wander while I'm talking, that's because I'm reading your posts here on my screen. And I hope I've got this figured out now. Okay, so please ask questions. All right, so let's look at last week here, the last week of June. And if you haven't seen the energy update from last week and I refer to it, then just go back, go to my YouTube channel and take the recording for last week. So last week we talked about something very important, and that is karmic attachments, karmic family stuff. And even if you don't believe in reincarnation or something like that, anyone who is energetically sensitive will at some point in their life realize that there are things stored within them, or that they're dealing with things that are not necessarily from their personal experience. And last week I went into karmic family aspects that can be inherited. So there's a lot of evidence, not just scientific evidence, that unresolved issues or trauma can be passed on to future generations genetically. We can all feel this energetically. Sure, some of our behavioral things have to do with how we were raised and how we were modeled certain things, but there are aspects that are within us that are beyond just sort of what we can understand with our mind. I will explain today how this connection between family karma and our inner child, how this can play out for us and why it's so important to look at this, all right? But first of all, I hope I'm speaking for most of you energetically sensitives here. Last week was actually kind of okay, all right? So if you didn't deal with a major relapse or some physical drama that was coming up, you may have had actually a pretty good week. We had some issues here in the sinus area, in the neck and shoulder area. I can feel it still a little bit. One of those like really typical pains that we energetically sensitives have, you know, this pain at the base of our skull that was very predominant last week. But other than that, maybe a few digestive issues, but other than that, it wasn't as heavy as we've been experiencing it in some of these other weeks that we talked about when there's a direct correctional wave coming in. Now next week and starting tomorrow, you'll feel maybe a little bit of low, okay? So I just want to give you a heads up here. There's a lot of emotionality still in the air, and the energies that are coming in right now have a lot to do with love and self-love. I just published an article here on my site, transcodes.com, or on the Facebook, that is called Understanding Love and Self-Love. So if you want to go into the deeper spiritual aspects of self-love and how this can play out in our relationships when we have issues with actually fully loving ourselves, then read this article or ask questions right here. This is your opportunity here, doing those live updates, to ask about certain things. All right, so there's a connection between family karma, the things that are inherited to us, and our inner child aspects, and our relationships. And because this entire next week is going to be dealing with relationships again, with our true feelings, with handling our emotions and connecting with the expression of that, not just in relationships, but because the next week brings those subjects, I want to illuminate here today how we can investigate this connection within ourselves a little bit and see how our attachments to certain things, how they are actually linked to aspects that we may not consciously recollect. But besides family karma, we also have quite a bit of accumulation in our energy field that comes from our childhood. So we're going to be talking about this. But I want to go back here and revisit last week. What was going on last week besides our physical symptoms? There was a lot of chaotic energies in last week. So it wasn't really that we could focus on one thing only, all right? There was a lot of stuff at work. There was a lot of stuff in our family going on. There was a really sort of erratic stuff politically, and nothing really that could inspire us to get caught into or swept away by any specific drama. We were really kind of a bit confronted with our own stuff last week, and this will continue for the next couple of weeks, really. It is in those times where we get a little bit of thank you for your greetings, we get a little bit of a reprieve here as far as outer bombardment is concerned, and yet feeling low can of course contribute to an outer crisis, like say a relationship crisis or a family crisis. So since this is a holiday weekend, chances are that a lot of us are actually spending time with our family, and that some of these deeper things come up, maybe not directly, maybe more indirectly, maybe more in the sense that we can feel the bombardment coming from other people. And that's why it's so important as an energetically sensitive or highly sensitive person to kind of understand the dynamics that are going on there, all right? So coming into this week from last week, where we had time to go into our deeper inner stuff, where we may have found out that we have some really deep fears or some really deep aspects that we don't appreciate or love about ourselves. And as most of you guys know, the things that we don't love about ourselves, the things that make it so difficult for us to actually connect with ourselves and that rub us the wrong way about ourselves, those are things that we get mirrored back in our relationships. And so from an energy training standpoint, it is very important for us to learn the dynamics of energetic projection and absorption. A lot of energetically sensitive and sensitive people and empaths complain about absorbing emotional energies from other people, and we talked about payoff last week, and also sort of getting a little bit of a victim attitude with this. But if you go a step deeper, you will find out that some of that absorption actually has to do with what you put out there. And many of us have gone through this crazy making, you know, for years, for decades, where other people just sort of laugh about us, or where they think that the way we see the world is naive or woo-woo or whatever. And that has created a lot of pain or trauma, a lot of sort of feeling that we don't belong, that we don't get any type of approval here from the outside, and we constantly feel inadequate. So feelings of inadequacy are very much linked to our inner child and our sort of traumatic storage in our pain body. The pain body is part of our energy field. For those of you who are interested in the direct location, it's actually located in our 8th chakra, which is unknown to most people. We have actually 14 chakras and not just 7. We have 7 chakras in our main, in our physical, those main 7 chakras that a lot of you guys are familiar with. But we also have second chakras outside of our body that define the layers of our aura, if you will, or our energy field, as we call it. And the pain body is located in the 8th chakra, which is slightly, you know, sort of probably like half a meter above your head and half a meter to a meter below your feet, sort of as a field around you. A lot of people visualize this as a sphere or sort of egg-shaped. It doesn't really matter how you visualize it. Quite frankly, it never really is in any particular shape, and most of us are constantly working on things, constantly under bombardment and so forth. So the shape is influenced by some of the things that we're going through as well. But for simplicity reasons, it's okay to think of your aura as of your energy body as like a sort of a sphere, you know, that goes around you. Here, a small tip for me, for those of you who do work with their energy body, who work with their chakras, don't forget the backside of your chakras, okay? A lot of people visualize everything, you know, wonderfully, but when they work with these energies, clearing them or trying to energize them, they tend to just sort of energize the frontal part. This is a very typical human error because, you know, because our eyes and point forward, so our energy fields are very often leaned forward, and our attention is leaned forward. So when you do energy work, you really want to make sure that you keep a sort of a symmetrical, concentric type of visualization, and that when you energize parts of your energy field, that you also do your backside just as you know, strong as you do as you work with the frontal part. And here's a wonderful question: how can we meditate on these outer chakras? This is part of the training that I keep mentioning, you know, that some of us want to engage in, and addressing those outer chakras requires a little bit of training, because most of us don't see chakras or these layers of our energy body. So we have to use sort of crutches. We have to use visualizations. And when you work with these layers of your energy body that are well, even more unseen. I mean, our physical chakras are unseen too, but I can at least point at, like, say, your sternum, and can say, okay, this is your solar plexus chakra. Or I can point at your throat, at my throat, and say, this is your throat chakra. And there's a logic there. Our mind, you know, can more easily visualize this. So when we work with our outer chakras, our consciousness chakras, as I call them, we have to use our feeling. And the feeling, when I say feeling, I don't mean necessarily emotions. I mean our subtle feelings, you know, everything that comes to us in our inner perception, in our inner vision. This can be visual for some people, but last week I pointed out that there's a fixation that we have on visualization. You know, we all have this sort of unconscious belief that something is only real if you can see it. In energy work, we know that this is not the case, that the channels that we perceive information in is very intricate, very complex, and we can receive information on our sensory levels, like our tactile, our auditory, our visual, and our olfactory level, but also in form of just gut feelings or intuition. So a lot of people will refer to it as intuition. All right, so let's just agree on intuition here for the sake of simplicity. That anything that comes in, any type of information that comes in for you is part of your intuition. This can be in form of physical sensations or visuals, but more often than not, it's actually more in form of like a sudden inner knowing, a sudden inner messaging, depending on sort of what our preoccupation is. It can come in many, many different ways. And so this training that I refer to, building our own lexicon of sensations, needs to encompass all of these. So we want to train all our senses, because this seventh sense, our energetic sensitivity, is not something that is new. It is basically the combination of all our senses in one. All right, so it's that sort of unified perceiving of things with all that I am. And the problem why we have difficulties with perceiving some of these more subtle things or more sort of spiritual things is because we are so fragmented within. So if I'm fragmented within, like say if I have an issue with allowing myself to feel all my emotions, like say if I have an issue with anger or with pain, and I don't allow myself to feel anger or to express anger or to feel pain, then I'm shutting down a part of my sensory system. And the problem with that is, especially for energetically sensitives, that we are so used to having to shut down this sort of extrasensory perception that we have shut down entire parts of our energy body out of fear to be shunned, out of fear to be judged. And so most of us really have that ability to sense or to connect with our intuition, but we have a mental or an emotional block or overlay that makes it more difficult for us to see this. So if I do training intensives, for instance, we have one coming up next weekend, or in 2 weeks, I don't know. I can look this up for you guys and post this in the commentary. We always start with the things that are easier to perceive for everyone. So we start with the physical chakras, and once a person can connect with these areas in the body, then we slowly move outward. Okay, we slowly move outward, and you will see me moving that way rather than that way. This is one of the most common sort of spiritual misconceptions, that everything sort of goes upwards. Okay, it doesn't. It's concentric. All right, so it's within, through, and around us, but not just upwards. The upwards orientation is something that we've picked up as a sort of collective implant, that we look for higher guidance upwardly, all right, which is actually inaccurate. However, coming back to like how do we meditate on these outer chakras, I teach people how to do this, but you can also do this yourself by just educating yourself a little bit on what else is out there, okay? But by training yourself to move your energy, not just within your body, that's of course always the first step, but to allow yourself to move your energy slightly outward, and then just sort of like start with something that is like sort of still attached here with your body, like right around you, and try to feel that energy. And don't just try to visualize it in sort of a form. Don't try to give it too much form. Try to really feel it out. Does it feel dented? Does it feel symmetrical? Does it have a color? Does it feel expansive, or does it feel contractive? And really just learn how to maneuver your energy within your energy field, not just your physical body. Our entirety of our energy field consists of different densities, of different layers, if you will. And I'll put up the chart here with the video recording. We have the physical as the densest part of our energy body, and it's a small part. It just happens to be the part that we perceive the most as real. All right. Then we have our emotional body, our emotional reality, which I think most of us would agree is pretty close to our physical. I mean, we can feel our emotions in our body for the most part, and science confirms this. It tries to reduce our emotions to those neural pathways and transmitters and hormones and so forth. But of course, that is not how we see this in the energetic reality. But so we have our physical, we have our emotion, and then we have our mental. And our mental is all the attitudes, the intentions, the what we often call the alignment that we add to what we're perceiving. But it's also the way we understand things and the way we look at things, including our beliefs. And that's a little less dense than our emotional body. And that's why most of us, I would say probably already almost 95% of us use our mental energy to cope, to deal with our emotions, and sometimes also with our body. So we have that ability due to our frontal lobe in our brain to contextualize, to conceptualize things. Okay, we can say, okay, I just cut my toe and I'm bleeding because my blood vessels got disrupted, and until it coagulates, I'm going to continue bleeding. So this helps us dealing with some of our physical and sometimes also emotional phenomena. And then we have the spiritual, and the spiritual aspect of our energy field, and now it sort of moves out into the intuitive, into the creative, into the how do I contextualize the things that I'm experiencing? Do I contextualize my pain in my toe now as a result maybe of something that I had been feeling, or that I had been wishing for, or instant karma, as some people call it? Or do I just see it as a random act of, just things happening to me? So the spiritual is not all just woo-woo, guys. It has a lot to do with our beliefs that we pick up as children. So a lot of us, even though we don't go to church, or we don't see ourselves belonging to a specific spiritual group or whatever, do have spiritual beliefs that can be useful to contextualize things and to open our minds and to be receptive to things like consciousness development and synchronicities, and seeing things sort of in a flow, and just sort of allowing things to be a bit more than just factual. But it can also limit us. It can also bring in blocks or preoccupations, such as the externalization of our higher powers. You hear me talk about this a lot, and I write a lot about this, because that's one of the biggest issues in spiritual healing and spiritual evolvement, is that we have these unconscious spiritual preoccupations. And a lot of us, even if we see ourselves as spiritually open, still think that we need to have this spiritual knowledge coming from the outside somehow, that we need spirit guides or animal guides, or that we need angels or anything outside of us to guide us, or a guru for that matter. We don't. We have all this in us. the biggest aspect here of spiritual consciousness development is clearing all these layers in our energy field, in our awareness, in our mental field, in our emotional field, and sometimes also in our physical field, so that we can feel and access that true inner voice, that true inner guidance better. All right, and this leads me here to another question. How can you clear your field? I mean, this is the whole science, really. I mean, this is what we've been doing for decades here, teaching people how to clear their field. And that's the reason why I'm talking about those different layers of our energy field, because a lot of people think like, oh, you know, it's like I book an energy clearing and then everything's going to be fine. Sometimes it can help us to clear sort of outer attachments, you know, things that we've picked up from somewhere or from somebody. Like say we just had a really bad relationship go down, and we have all this sort of pain in us, and we just don't seem to be able to shake that loose. You know, an energy clearing can help us to clear this out of our energy, out of our emotional field. But then, you know, some of our pain and some of our trauma, let's say we got cheated on, or we cheated on someone, you know, has stored in different places in our energy field, in like say in our body. Even a lot of us have pain memories stored in our physical cells. Those things can be proven. It's not even just some things that I make up. In fact, I had a really good question here this last week about how pain and suffering and so forth, how this could possibly be inherited from one generation to another. And there is actually proof now that trauma can be genetically inherited to a following generation. So we have things stored in our physical cells, including our DNA. And this could be recent trauma, you know, stuff that we've just recently went through. This could be childhood trauma, or this could be something that we actually picked up from our parents or grandparents or ancestors a few generations back that got sort of passed on to us. And so bringing back to both questions here, how can we meditate on our consciousness chakra, on these outer layers of our energy field, and how can we clear them? If we have no specific training or a specific understanding, then the best way to see it is like you go into your heart. That's always where you begin. You begin in your heart. And you just really try to focus on healing and on you sort of letting go of whatever is there. And if you go back a few weeks, I've demonstrated a breathing technique called I Am breathing technique. It's also described on the website, how to use your heart field to clear your entire energy field. You don't need to know anything about energy work to be able to do this. You may not get specific information like, oh yeah, I just cleared a karmic attachment out of my emotional field. You don't need to know any of this. You can do this with the power of your heart. And it's really a simple matter of conscious breathing into your heart and conscious releasing. Now, like I said earlier, there's a whole science about this, so there's different ways of releasing different attachments, different things out of different parts of our energy body. And those of you who feel really attracted, who resonate with energy work, I would recommend you to educate yourself. And my website is full with understanding this, understanding that, and really giving in-depth explanations for how to clear things. But the general rule about clearing is that you first of all have to have that sort of acceptance about that you accumulate things on an energetic level and not just on a physical. Like for all of us, it's normal to take a shower, to wash our hands and so forth, because we accept the fact that we have sort of these residues on us all day long, you know, be it our own sort of metabolic residues or just the dirt that we pick up as we go. Well, the layers, the different layers of our energy body, they pick up residues as well, and those are not always just your own. You pick up residues from other people or from collective energies as well. So the clearing is a bit more intricate, and that's why there's people like us, who can actually do a clearing for you or teach you how to do this yourself. So in general, it's the intention of wanting to clear. Are there mediums? Are there things that you can use, items that promote clearing? Absolutely. So besides, of course, supporting your physical body in your clearing process. So the easiest physical clearing process is washing, is using water, fire, air, earth, to just sort of not even, doesn't even have to be fancy, to just really cleanse the outer layers. And on the inner level, you can do energetic detoxes with foods, with doing like a light fast or something, or having a high vibrational diet altogether. This is something that I recommend people, is to have a diet that is generally supporting of clearing, that allows things to go through your system quickly without leaving too much residue. All right, but when it comes to the more difficult aspects of our energy body that are harder for ourselves to access, like trauma, for instance. Trauma is known to be a tough one to clear out of your system, because most people approach it with their minds, and trauma is below our mind. It cannot be accessed with our mind. And the same with some of the spiritual attachments that we have, that we're not always aware of them, and that's why our mind is pretty limited here as far as like visualization, or as far as like intention. All right, so this requires a little more of energetic understanding. I would recommend, in general, to go to my blog, use the keyword search, and type in things like clearing, type in things like projecting, absorbing, and so forth. You get a lot of information. But we have public sessions going on every 2-3 days, and we teach. So most of our sessions are based on teaching, are based on getting you into that place where you can learn how to do this yourself. All right, so whether it's clearing or meditating, the more you know about yourself, the more you acknowledge that you contract, or that you have things in you that are unseen, the easier intuitive clearing techniques will come to you. But of course, there are some very efficient clearing techniques that can be learned. Another question here in that regards, like we're using items. Okay, so you will read this a lot and hear this a lot. There's things that you can use. You can use invocations to clear, which states your intention. But again, if it goes beyond the things that your mind can understand, it's very difficult to formulate an intention, because you don't really know what you're clearing. So a lot of people use things like smudging, like using sage, using essential oils, using herbs, all these things, crystals, all of these are very valid, and they can help you not only to clear things that you don't see or that you don't know about, but also to connect with this within yourself. So if you feel intuitively drawn to using crystals or using herbs in any form, whether you smudge them or whether you burn them or you ingest them, that's up to you. But if you educate yourself, read up, or sign up for an herbology course, or sign up for shamanic clearing courses, or crystal healing, okay, all these things, if they come to you intuitively, then spend time on connecting with these items and allow your inner resonance to guide you. There's other things like music, sound, drumming, that can help you to clear things. So we very often recommend physical activities for clearing. So if you believe it or not, to go out and chop wood can be a very, very effective clearing method, and it doesn't always have to be the fancy stuff. You don't need any other people, or you don't need any items to clear energies. But again, depending on where they're located in your energy field, they may be easier for you to clear or harder, and that's when you go and seek professionals, professional energy workers. So here's a question: how can we release DNA inherited pain we may just be carrying from our past generations fully? Well, this is one of those things that are harder for us to access. I talked about this last week. So there's a technique that I am, it's very simplified, but it's a technique that I'm introducing, how to go into reconciliation with a person. You can also use this to reconcile with previous generations. We have energy work modalities for that, and specifically for this generational inheritance of trauma or any type of energetic or karmic attachment. We have one coming up tomorrow, for instance, and that's a technique that we record so that people can do this on their own accord. So during this session, we observe a person's energy field and help them to get through, and after session we discuss this, like what came up for you, what we saw, and how to best address this. This is what we call energy coaching. But we record these processes so that a person can do this in self-guidance. I mean, we've created an entire 24-step sacred self-healing course that does nothing else but leading a person through all these different layers of their energetic journey. And there's not only explanations but also hands-on examples how you can do this, and recordings that come with each step that teach you how to do this. All right. Here another question: how often should one clear the energy field? You know, we've had a meeting, a webinar meeting, like we have regular online meetings here with the Sacred Self-Healing community, and we talked about this. It's all about acknowledging that clearing is an ongoing process. It never really ends. All right, so it's just like dirt on your hands. I mean, how many times should you wash your hands a day? That depends on your exposure. And energetic exposure may be something that you can't fully contextualize yet. But if you're asking me, energetic clearing should be a part of our understanding of our own reality, of our own energetic reality, which means that whenever we feel low, whenever we feel like impaired, whenever we feel blocked, this should be our first thought: go into clearing. And of course, energy work or any type of spiritual work will always lead to meditating, to going within, to silencing the mind. All right, so it's not really a mental process, it's an inner process. And in order to successfully and effectively engage in that inner process, we need to learn how to train our mind, how to train our body, how to not fall asleep, for instance, when we meditate, how to train our mind to shut up, you know, and to get to the deeper inner stuff, and to really connect with our true inner feelings. And if you do this, you know, like say for a couple of months, a couple of weeks, a couple of years, it can take decades for us to be able to do this effectively. Younger people like yourselves, you know, it seems to be a lot easier. It took me 20 years to get to that place, so it's not always an easy journey. But once we are in that place where we're connected with our inner energies, we will get the prompting to clear ourselves when needed. And this can be at any point during your day. And I recommend clearing techniques that are not too, say, you know, that require you to put on red socks and have a specific props or something. So, but to apply clearing techniques that are most natural, most intuitive to you. If you're asking me personally, I always have sage here. I always have lavender here. I always have things that help me to clear my energy from the outside. But of course, I do energy sessions all day long, and so I'm in this practice. of really going inside. If something bugs me, if something comes up, if I feel like what I would call like an energetic dissonance within me, then I intuitively go into clearing, and sometimes the clearing goes quick and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes I have to use more fancy techniques, and sometimes I have to go really, really deep, and sometimes I just have to lay down. Sometimes an energetic attachment or block can be so intense that I feel that I'm not able to function physically, right? Talking to energetically sensitives here, I'm sure you guys have experienced this as well. So there are conditions often triggered by collective energies or by interaction with other people that can really inhibit us in our function. And so accepting and acknowledging that we contract energies or that we accumulate residues of our own stuff every day, that's sort of the best way of approaching clearing. But quite frankly, clearing is only half the deal, all right? If we want to heal things within us, then clearing is just sort of the preparation really for healing work. What has to happen next is the connection with our inner self-healing abilities, and to strengthen our system, to resolve, to reconcile, and to really go into this place where we learn to integrate and learn to reframe, recontextualize, or love certain aspects about us again. So yes, sometimes we need someone else who helps us with clearing. So it depends on how persistent certain things are. I talked, the last 2 weeks, I talked about karmic attachments, karmic patterns, and repetitions. All right, so some of the repetitions that we experience in our lives are things that we do unconsciously, or things that we are not even aware of that they repeat, and we kind of choose them. And last week I talked specifically about ego payoff. So if we have things that are really difficult for us to shake off, we do need to investigate our part in it. How do we enable this? What in our behavior, or in our attitude, or in our how we present ourselves keeps attracting something like that back? And maybe there's something that we sort of secretly or unconsciously get out of this. So that's behavioral. Then we have emotional attachments, where we just have this like a really strong aptitude, to like or like say affinity is maybe the better word, to be attracted by other people's dramas, and that of course will bring in other people's energy. So we absorb a lot, and therefore we have a lot to clear. All right, so it's not always that easy. Attachments are not, as people think, like coming from demons or outer forces. Sometimes they do, but quite frankly, that's the minority of energetic attachments or dissonances or blockages that we deal with. The majority comes from our own choices, from our own attitudes, from our own inner fragmentation, from our own inner dragons, from our shadows, from things that we're avoiding, from things that we don't dare or not ready yet, or simply choose not to face. All right, so it isn't always that easy, but having said this about clearing, understand that clearing is just really one part of it. Okay, so we think we can wash everything off, but oftentimes we can't, because it's deeply ingrained. Now, there was another question here that let me scroll back here. See, I haven't fully figured this out. But if I miss one of you guys' questions, then I have to reread them. Yeah. I apologize if I can't answer every question live. Please comment here in the commentary, or if you're watching this video on YouTube, just ask questions. Really, I'll answer them. So in regards to some of the family karma that I mentioned earlier, I want to point out also that those of us who are parents or want to be parents, that there is, of course, a connection with all the stuff that we can't resolve in this lifetime. And if it isn't enough for us to do sort of this resolution with ourselves, for ourselves, you know, then it may motivate you to think of some of the things that you don't resolve in this lifetime, that you may actually pass this on to your children. For me personally, this was a big motivator to really go in and do this self-healing and consciousness work with myself. And the karma work that I did was probably one of the single most transformative experiences in my life, spiritually as well as emotionally and mentally. When I learned how to do karma work, I really began to see the connection between a lot of these things, and not just the things that I could sort of psychologically understand already. So sometimes it can also help to educate ourselves on psychological things. But I did realize why they kept on repeating in my life. All right, and my story. So if you're interested, there's a blog article that I wrote a couple of years back. It's called something along the lines, My Personal Story of Recovery. And there I show how things looked like to me, like when I was 20, and how all the different types of energy and spiritual work that I did over the years, how this helped me to contextualize some of my suffering and some of my pain, and really let go of them, and how I see it today. It's just not so much about the details of my story, but it's I'm showing my personal sort of career there, how I learned to recontextualize things. All right. So yes, I can see a lot of you guys can relate to this. So why are we talking about this here? We're talking about this because this has been something that has been going on in the collective. So as a whole sort of human collective, no matter where you live in this world right now, that's been coming up the last weeks. And how does this play in now with the next week, with the energies that are coming in next week? So next week will be all about our relationships, about connecting and relating. And things that may have come up in the last couple of weeks will now actually begin to be visible for us. And here I want to pick the question that I mentioned in the beginning, where someone asked me, like, how is this fear of inadequacy, this constant fear of not being good enough or not belonging, how does that relate to maybe things that I've inherited, or maybe things that I've experienced at such an early stage of my life that I can't sort of psychologically or mentally access that part? Well, the connection between our inner child aspects and our karmic family aspects is kind of easy to see. Let's talk through one example here. Let's say you have your family lineage has a history, say, of like in my personal example, alcoholism. So there was a pattern that I've discovered in my lineage, which shocked me when I first found out that all my male relatives on my mother's and my father's side, they were all alcoholics for generations. Okay, for generations. And I was wondering why I felt attracted to people with addiction issues. I at first I thought I was cursed or whatever, but then I found out, like, okay, there is a part besides maybe some of the genetic inheritance. So I knew very early in my life that I probably had an aptitude for addictive structure. But this didn't explain to me, you know, why I kept on feeling attracted to the same type of guy, if you will. And here is sort of the connection, the bridge from karma into inner child. Okay, so if there is an aptitude, like say a propensity that I bring into this life, and in karma work, we actually assume that we pick our parents accordingly. So we pick our parents according to the karmic task, the karmic healing that we want to go through in this lifetime. all right, then I can clearly see, okay, here I've picked families that bring in this addictive structure of from all levels, on all sort of in all colorations, all right. So apparently there's something that I wanted to experience in this lifetime. And then, of course, I had a childhood, an early childhood that was dominated by addictive structure, by all the psychological, emotional, and also physical ramifications of addictive family structures, of addictive family dysfunctions. And so once I accepted the fact that I have a karmic attachment here in regards to addiction, then I began to illuminate how this actually played out in my family, in my inner child experiences. And it was as clear as day. All of a sudden I could see that most of my traumatic events that I could recall were connected with addiction. They had something to do with even the abuse that I experienced later as a teenager or a young adult. There was always a connection to addiction. And I can now see that even though, of course, it's not my fault per se, but how a part of my energy enabled some of these experiences and led to a constant repeat. And so when we look into our early childhood, and some of us can't even remember things in our early childhood, which is often part of all this trauma and dysfunction that we had. Not to say that all parents are bad parents. Insufficient parenting has nothing to do with having bad parents, okay? Our parents had their limitations. And again, here, connection to family karma. They had their issues to deal with from their previous generations. So that there's an opportunity here to contextualize all of this and to see how things are really passed on from one generation to another. And if we want to disrupt the cycle right here, right now, even if we are young and we don't see maybe ourselves as parents at some point, but thinking of our future generations, if we want to disrupt something, then it's our responsibility here and now, not right now, but you know what I mean, right? In this lifetime, to finally resolve through some of these things and work through those things. And this is where energy work comes in, because energy work allows us to access these parts of our energy that are not necessarily accessible through emotional, behavioral, or mental work like psychology, counseling, psychotherapy. Sometimes hypnotherapy can help, but energy work can really bypass some of the mental preoccupations, the beliefs, and so forth that we have, and even the spiritual beliefs, and help us to see, say, my issues and my relationship right now, how they are related to my inner child attachments, to my karmic family attachments. All right, and this is another modality that I would recommend to each of you if you really want to work on resolving some of your repetitive relationship issues, which is exactly sort of what is coming up here in this week now. Do inner child integration. And, you can do this with counselors, with therapists that are trained in this. You can do this with energy workers, or do it here at transCODES in individual or group energy sessions, where we train you how to do this on your own, by yourself. All right, so inner child integration is the big theme here for this next week. And quite frankly, again, I feel like a broken record, because I've been talking about inner child stuff and karmic stuff so much in the past weeks. And guess what? If you're at a place where you're starting to get really tired of it, really bored of it, really like it's getting old, then use this. Use this to finally let go of some of your attachments in the past. Yes, it's time to let go of your past. You're not going to get to this place of inspiration, of success, of happiness, of joy, or ascension, whatever you have on your goal list here, without letting go of the past. You've got to let go. this week is your wake-up call, is your, you know, your last chance. No, not your last chance. You'll never really cease to have chances and opportunities, but it's a wonderful opportunity, let's put it this way, to work through some of the stuff in your past. And it may actually be that some of you may feel that the relationship that you're in is not conducive anymore. I'm seeing a lot of breakups for the next week, and when you're in that sort of crisis of going through a breakup, then remember to go into your heart and ask your heart guidance. So many times I've seen people like going into this emotional drama about a breakup, and yet when I work with them, only after a few sessions, turns out that it was actually the best thing that could happen for them, because it freed up so much energy that they can now use for manifesting their true needs, their true goals. But one more thing in regards to the energies that are coming up next week, and letting go of the past. Be gentle with yourself, all right? Go into that soft energy, into your heart. You don't have to be an expert in meditation, all right? Try to see the pain in other people, even if they're really mean and ugly to you, all right? Try to see the pain underneath that and use your empathy. But don't absorb their stuff either. So that's not your job as an empath, to run around and let everybody vent and dump their stuff onto you. Your job is to use this softness, this energetic sensitivity to be able to make connections and to explain things to yourself, to contextualize, you know, these things so that you can transcend them. The reason why there's so many empaths and so many highly sensitive people emerging right now is because our whole entire collective needs to go into healing. And with our energetic sensitivity comes that inner knowing, comes that ability to connect with our self-healing abilities. So part of next week's letting go of the past is also, it's not just the painful stuff, and also, but it's also to accepting, you know, our karmic tasks, to accept your talents, to accept all the cool things, you know, that you can do with this, and maybe even moving forward in your inspiration to take up a healing modality, or to learn more, to be creative, or start writing, start making music, start courses, you know, to connect, to help other people to connect. Those things will be very, very conducive next week. So this is sort of what we're looking at. We're looking at letting go of the past, the pain of the past, accepting, acknowledging some of that, learning how to clear things, learning how to let go of things, so that we can finally move into this more active manifestation phase that is coming up now, and into our creativity and into our inspiration, into the joy of life. All right, so that's my energy update here for the week, for the coming week, July 2nd to the 8th of July, and then we have a full moon come up. So with full moon, there's always like a little bit of a natural clearing going on, and things are probably going to heat up a little bit. Then next time we'll be talking probably about that, and it will be next Thursday at 2 p.m. U.S. Mountain Time. Which is 9 p.m. in the UK, 10 p.m. in Middle Europe, and I think somewhat like 10 a.m. in Australia. I'm not 100% sure. So stay tuned. Sign up for my written energy report, where I go into detail, where I provide charts, where I provide a bit more information about these techniques that I just mentioned. And another announcement that is coming up here pretty soon is that we have just finalized the upcoming live workshop. This is not a remote energy workshop. This is going to be an in-person workshop here in Denver, Colorado, coming up at the equinox in September. So stay tuned. A lot of cool stuff is coming up, and I thank you for your attention. I thank you for your questions and all your support. All right, so keep sharing my reports, my videos, articles. They're very educational. Ask questions. I give the opportunity to everyone to have a free initial energy coaching with me. So help me to make this, to spread this, and to reach more people, all right, so that everybody can benefit for this. Thank you so much. You have a wonderful holiday weekend, a wonderful holiday week. Stay safe and don't get caught up in relationship dramas, okay?